Chapter 10. Abby laughed as she chased Zohar through the small village. He loved the paint house. Abby had been in charge of creating the activities for the village. She had made sure each house had something different to offer. Some were designed for the kids to play virtual games in, others were for them to do simple arts and crafts, while still others held the old-fashioned games found at the local fairs from back home. "Mama!" Zohar giggled as he patted the crystal ball in the center square that talked to the kids. "Mama, talk!" Abby chuckled as Zohar patted the crystal ball again to wake her up. She was just thankful that Zohar had stopped for a moment as she drew in a deep breath. Stopping behind him, she waited to see if the programming worked like it was supposed to. "Hi, sweetie," the imitation Abby said with a smile. "What do you want to play today?" "Paint!" Zohar shouted in excitement, slapping the ball. "Mama, paint!" The imitation Abby's head turned until she was looking at the paint house. "Paint it is. Have fun, Zohar." Abby sighed as Zohar called out a goodbye and took off for the house that suddenly lit up in bright colors. The faint sound of music could be heard coming from the inside. Shaking her head, she started after him. "Thank goodness the paint disappears," Abby muttered with a weary laugh as she watched Zohar run to the bucket of blue, which was currently his favorite color. The engineers, with Cara's help, had designed a special paint for Abby when she tried to figure out a way for the kids to be creative without it being a disaster for the parent. This paint felt and appeared real, but was made up of a non-toxic powder that disappeared after a few minutes. Zohar loved it when she showed him how he could rub it on the walls, floors, even his body, and then watch it fade away. Now he was running blue streaks along the floor while Goldie, in the shape of a large dog, had decided to dip each paw in a different color and walk around. Abby slid down on one of the seats and laid her head back. A yawn escaped her, and her eyes drooped as she watched the symbiote and Zohar play. She wished she had their energy right now, but Zoran had done a pretty good job of tiring her out earlier. "Goldie, keep a good eye on Zohar," Abby called out in a tired voice. "I'm not thinking too clearly right now." The golden symbiote turned and sneezed in acknowledgement as Zohar, now with blue feet, clung to its tail as it pulled him around the room. The combination of exhaustion, relaxing back on the soft seat, and the music soon pulled Abby into a light sleep. "I'll close my eyes for just a minute," she murmured, as she slid sideways on the bench and curled her long legs up on it. Zoran stumbled into the village and turned with a scowl. He was on the opposite side of the cavern from where he had planned. After he pulled himself out of the river, he had found himself on the far side of it. He had planned to cut through a narrow cut between the rocks, but another one of those damn storms that Cara seemed fond of had sent a torrential burst of rain down on him. He swore his hair almost got scorched by some of the lightning that she had programmed in. Fortunately, the windstorm he had encountered as he came through the other side had dried his clothing. Now he would need to cut back through it or go around. He turned and glanced down the long row of houses on each side of the village. In the center there was a small, round ball that was glowing. Something was moving inside it, and curiosity pulled at him. He glanced back toward where he knew the entrance was before deciding a few more minutes wouldn't hurt. "I can always shift and fly back," he muttered as he turned back to the glowing green ball. Striding down the main square, his eyes swept over the signs on the outside of the buildings. House of Tag, House of Mazes, Web House. The names just went on and on. He had to admit he would love to come back and explore what each one meant. His gaze swept back to the glowing ball, and he stumbled when he saw that there was a head inside it. A shudder went through him when he saw it move. There was something eerily familiar about it. He stopped in horror and amazement when the head turned and he saw his mate's delicate face looking back at him. "Hello, Zoran," the head said with a smile. "What can I do for you?" Abby? Zoran choked out as he stepped closer. He reached a trembling hand out to touch the glass. What happened to you? How did you get in there? Where is the rest of you? Abby's brown eyes blinked, and she tilted her head as if she was trying to process all of his disjointed questions. After a few seconds, her head straightened and she began to speak. It took a moment for him to understand what she was saying as he was so focused on her face. I am the village mistress. I am a robotic replica of Abby Tanner Rykill, an artist from a distant world called Earth. Abby enjoys creating unique and wonderful works of art and has shared her love for it. Abby is currently in the paint house. Do you have any other questions? You are not real? Zoran asked in amazement as her facial expressions changed just like Abby's did. A soft chuckle echoed from the crystal ball. No, the real Abby is in the paint house. Would you like to go to the paint house? Yes, Zoran mumbled with a shake of his head. Follow the lights, the bodiless Abby said as she turned. Zoran watched as small lights lit the ground, and one of the houses began to glow. Nodding his head, he turned away and followed the arrows. He glanced back over his shoulder to see the head of his mate again. Her eyes were closed, and a serene smile curved her lips. He swore it looked real. This just keeps getting more amazing, he whispered, as he stepped into the paint house. Abby tried to open her eyes as she felt warm hands caressing her face. They were larger and rougher than Zohar's tiny ones. She felt her dragon purr and knew immediately that Zoran had found them. Mate, care for us, her dragon murmured in a sleepy voice. Yes, Abby replied in a voice that was barely audible. Zoran will take care of us. Abby could feel her body being lifted, then cradled in strong arms before she slipped into a deeper sleep. She could let go and relax now. Zoran would protect them. Zoran had scanned the room as he entered. His eyes crinkled in amusement as he watched Zohar and Goldie sitting in front of the far wall, putting hand and paw prints all over it. He turned to see where Abby was, knowing instinctively she wouldn't be far away. His eyes softened as he took in her slumbering form. Dark shadows under her eyes showed that she was beyond tired. Placing his fingers to his lips when Zohar turned and saw him, he walked over to where Abby was curled up on the padded bench. Kneeling on one knee, he tenderly caressed her cheek. Yes, Abby murmured in a voice that was barely audible. Zoran will take care of us. I will always take care and protect you, he whispered in a soft voice. You are an incredible mate. I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I will always thank the goddess for bringing me into your life. Rising up, he gently picked her up in his arms. A satisfied smile brightened his eyes as she snuggled against him. Turning, he sank down onto the bench so that he could watch Zohar play. His head fell back against the wall as he thought of the day he had first woken up in Abby's mountain home. She had cared for the wounds on his body, even though she knew he was not from her world. He bowed his head to stare at her relaxed features. She looked so delicate, so fragile, but she had the soul of a warrior. His fingers trembled ever so slightly when he thought of the times when he almost lost her, first on Earth, then on his own world. His eyes connected with Zohar's when he felt the tiny hands of their son on his knee. Daddy, sleep, Zohar murmured, yawning. Yes, it is time to sleep, Zoran answered in a quiet voice. Let Goldie carry you while I carry Mommy. Mommy, night-night? Zohar asked, looking at Abby. Zoran's soft chuckle roused Abby for a moment. Yes, I think you and I have made Mommy very tired, he said, as he sent a silent message to Goldie. Let's go back upstairs, Zohar giggled, as golden bands swept out and lifted him up into a pair of golden claws. Play tomorrow, Zohar demanded, as he yawned and snuggled closer to Goldie. Paint! Zoran rose to his feet and walked out of the paint house. He looked up at the glittering ceiling, still finding it hard to believe that the twinkling lights were not real stars. Turning, he glanced at Zohar. His tired son had already joined his mother in sleep. "You are so much like your mother," Zoran murmured proudly. "Come, my friend," Zoran whispered to his dragon. "Let us take our mate and son home." Soon, a dark green, gold, and red dragon, followed by a golden one, sped across the cavern. From up above, Zoran was able to truly appreciate all the work and love that had gone into creating the magical world below him. He still wasn't sure what Halloween was, but he did know that it was a special time to share with his family. Creon froze as he stood watching the three figures playing and giggling. A shiver of unease, fear, and anger raced through him. He knew immediately that the golden figure holding his daughter's hands was not a part of Harvey. In fact, it was not a part of any symbiote he knew. "Let them go," he ordered, as he stepped out from behind a set of mirrors. "Now!" He watched as the figure of the goddess turned. His body stiffened in an effort to keep the trembling inside him from escaping. He needed to get his daughters away from here and back to the safety of his living quarters. "Dada!" Spring cried in delight. She pulled away from the golden hand and launched her small body at him. Creon reached out and scooped Spring up into his arms. Holding her close, his eyes moved to where Phoenix watched him with sad, troubled eyes. Reaching out his left hand, he beckoned for her to come to him. "Phoenix, come to Daddy," Creon ordered in a hoarse voice. Phoenix looked up at the figure of the woman holding her hand before she looked back at Creon. A frown crossed her face as she studied her father's tense expression. Creon fought the urge to shout at her to come to him. "Dada! Good!" Phoenix said, moving closer to the figure. "Dada! Good, good!" "Phoenix, come to Mommy," Carmen's soft voice whispered behind Creon. "Please, come to Mommy." Creon glanced briefly at Carmen before he returned his gaze to his youngest daughter. A sigh of relief escaped him when Phoenix reluctantly released the hand she was holding and toddled over to Carmen, who scooped her up. They both stood staring at the bemused face of the goddess who was watching her. "Why are you here?" Creon demanded. The figure tilted her head and smiled in mischief. The surrounding mirrors no longer reflected her form, only that of Creon, Carmen, and the girls. It was hard to look at the figure. "I wanted to play," Arilla replied in a calm voice. "I enjoy spending time with your offspring." "Why?" Creon asked hoarsely. "What do you want from them?" The goddess before him opened her mouth but said nothing, as another form suddenly appeared next to her. The first goddess winced and looked contrite as the new one arrived. A deep sigh escaped the new goddess. "Arilla, find your sister," Ikaterina ordered in a quiet but firm voice. "Yes, Ikaterina," Arilla mumbled before she disappeared. Creon watched as the form moved closer to him. He wanted to pull away. He wanted to hand Spring to Carmen and order that she take the girls and run, but his body refused to cooperate with his mind. "Creon?" Carmen whispered in a frantic voice. "I can't move." Small hands cupped her cheek as she spoke. "It okay, Mommy? Good, good," Phoenix said. "Leave my daughters alone," Creon demanded in a thick voice. Please leave Phoenix alone." Ikaterina sighed as she stepped closer to the two protective parents. She sent a wave of dancing sparkles to Spring, who giggled and tried to catch them. This Dragonling was made of light. She would always brighten the world around her. Her eyes moved to Phoenix, who watched her with knowing eyes. "This one," she thought. "This one would help save the world of another." Her destiny was already written among the stars. "It is not what we want from Phoenix, but who she is to become," Ikaterina murmured in a soothing voice. What do you mean?" Carmen asked in a trembling voice as she watched powerlessly as Ekaterina reached out and touched Phoenix's cheek. Why? Why her? She's just a baby. She will not always be so young. She is meant for something greater than you know, Ekaterina replied with a sigh before she shook her head and glided back a few steps. It is already written in the stars. What is written? Creon demanded, shaking with rage at his inability to protect his family. I cannot interfere with what is to come, Ekaterina replied in a solemn voice. Believe in her. Believe what? Creon asked, in a voice filled with frustration. She will rise again, Ekaterina whispered as she faded. Creon turned protectively to shield Carmen and Phoenix the moment he could move again. Carmen, shaking so badly she wasn't sure her legs would hold her, stumbled against him, shivering. What does that mean? She asked, in a low, trembling voice filled with emotion. What does she will rise again mean? I Phoenix, Phoenix replied with a grin. I be good. Uncertainty fought with horror and fear. Creon stared into Carmen's worried eyes. Phoenix had called the goddess Good. He knew the meaning of the phoenix on Carmen's world. Did that mean the same thing here? His eyes swiveled back to Phoenix. He heard Carmen's gasp at the same time as his own breath caught in his throat. Phoenix's eyes glowed a dark gold, but deep in the center, where her pupils were, he could swear he saw the images of swirling galaxies. Please, he whispered, as he pulled Carmen and Phoenix into his arms so that they were closer to Spring and his body. Please, she is just a baby.